Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the State Energy Planning Board meeting. I'm Doreen Harris, President and CEO of NYSERDA and the Chair of the State Energy Planning Board. As a reminder, today's meeting is open to the public to observe, both in person here in Albany and on our live stream. Thank you to everyone who is here with us today and to those tuned in online as well. Next slide, please. Before turning to our agenda, I'd like to welcome the members of the State Energy Planning Board and their designees. I ask that each board member or delegate introduce themselves. Going around the table, please share your name, title, and agency.
Amanda Lefton, Commissioner, Department of Environmental Conservation.
Richard Ball, Commissioner, New York State Department of Ag and Markets.
Jackie Bray, Commissioner at the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. And I would just note in these documents, we're represented as the Office of Emergency Management and Office of Counterterrorism. So that's where we are here.
Dr. James McDonald, Commissioner, New York State Department of Health.
Yvonne Martinez, Deputy Commissioner, Policy Strategy and Research for the New York State Department of Labor, and I'm here on behalf of Commissioner Roberta Reardon.
Keisha Santiago, Deputy Secretary of State, on behalf of Walter Mosley, Department of State.
Thank you. William Suggs, New York State Senate appointee.
Good afternoon, Rich Dewey, President and CEO of the New York Independent System Operator.
Rory Christian, Chair of the Public Service Commission.
Hope Knight, President, CEO, Empire State Development.
Marie-Therese Dominguez, Commissioner of the New York State Department of Transportation.
And Chancellor King, who is participating in voting at today's meeting remotely by video conference due to extraordinary circumstances. Would you like to say hello?
John King, Chancellor of the State University of New York.
Thank you, Chancellor. For the record, I note that we have a quorum for today's meeting. Thank you all for attending. Next slide, please. Please note for the record that the preliminary agenda was shared with board members and posted on the Energy Plan website for the public to review on Monday, July 14th. The final agenda was shared with the board and the public on Thursday, July 17th. I'd like to start by noting that we have a momentous agenda today, albeit a packed agenda. So I will move forward with the agenda, which includes first, reviewing and approving the minutes of the June 25th, 2025 board meeting. Discussing and considering a resolution to publish our transmission and distribution study of the state's electric system. Discussing the last components of the state energy plan topic areas. And importantly, discussing and considering a resolution to publish the draft state energy plan for the purpose of soliciting public comments. And finally, we will close out with an identification of the next steps for the state energy plan. Before I dive into our agenda, I do want to acknowledge Assemblymember Barrett. Would you care to say hello?
Hello, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, Assemblymember, and thank you all. Next slide, please. Just some brief updates from me before we turn to the rest of the agenda. Next slide. First, earlier this month, the federal reconciliation bill passed with substantial changes to the tax policies and program priorities for certain energy resources, specifically solar and wind, which we have been looking at as necessary contributors to our energy resource mix. While we are still assessing the immediate and future impacts of this new law, we can say with certainty it will have an impact on our 15-year outlook in the energy plan. And while we have today, and as you know, taken some account for changes in federal policy as we prepared the plan for consideration, we will need to consider how to acquire a better understanding of the impacts of these new directions on our energy resources, our energy workforce, and our economic and environmental policies in New York. So the plan will be to provide additional information to each of you and the public as we advance consideration of a final plan. What I can say is that our energy planning work will continue to advance New York State's policies, which include the advancement of clean energy technologies and market transformation efforts as part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy that includes investments in wind, solar, other supply and demand-side energy resources to ensure affordable and reliable energy systems that simultaneously promote the economic growth, improved public health, and a cleaner environment for our state. Next slide, please. Turning to New York. Earlier this month, I'm very pleased to say that I participated with DEC Commissioner Lefton and PSC Chair Christian at the Energy and Environmental Leadership of the 10 Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative participating states in the advancement of and agreement to amendments to the RGGI program, including extensions of reductions to the carbon dioxide emissions cap for the period between 2027 and 2037, and also establishing additional protections to ensure RGGI remains an affordable policy instrument. Importantly, this agreement demonstrates that bipartisan agreement can still be reached on energy policies, that states can provide model approaches for national action, and that we can evolve the RGGI program to continue to deliver a reliable and resilient electric grid, improve public health, deliver economic benefits, and protect the environment in the Northeast. To date, RGGI allowance auctions have yielded more than $2.88 billion in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and innovative technology and market approaches to emissions reductions in all regions of New York State. In another update, just last week, the Public Service Commission announced the expansion of energy bill discounts to gas and electric utility customers below median income who did not qualify for existing energy assistance programs. This new program is designed to support the state's existing goal of holding low-income households' utility bills below 6% of household income and advancing Governor Hochul's focus on energy affordability. With that, I will turn to the next slide. The next item on the agenda today is to accept the meeting minutes of the State Energy Planning Board held on June 25th, 2025. Are there any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes into the record and post them on the website. Do I have a second? All members in favor? Anyone opposed? The meetings are accepted into the record. Next slide, please. Moving to our next agenda item, Chris Hall, NYSERDA's Assistant Director of Policy and Analysis and Research, will present on the supplemental study on the state's electric transmission and distribution system. Board members may recall that at the initiation of our energy plan, we noted the requirement of the energy planning law for this additional study to be issued by the planning board. As stated in the planning law, this report is supplemental to the energy plan itself and supports the energy plan's development alongside other reports and analyses. So Chris has been ensuring we meet this planning law requirement, working with a number of participants from agencies, the New York Independent System Operator, the New York State Reliability Council, and the state's electric utilities to complete this study. Board members have been provided a draft of this study, and after Chris's presentation, we will consider a motion to approve publication of this study. Chris.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Can you hear me okay? Mic working?
Keep it close to your mouth.
Closer?
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present the T&D reliability study. And let's dive in. We're on the right slide. So here's our agenda today. We're going to do some brief background. In other words, what is this study for? Why are we doing it? And then we're going to go over a high-level report outline, essentially review the table of contents. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time reviewing the final section on future reliability issues that we've identified. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Coming. So why are we doing this study, first of all? Well, we feel it's a useful work product, of course, but note the law requires it. The site of laws above, Energy Law 6108, I'm certainly not going to read it, but for reference, this law, the takeaway is this study is required by law. And what is the study? This is a technical study detailing issues related to the T&D reliability, T&D system in New York State and T&D system reliability, and it supports the New York State Energy Plan. Next slide. So I'm going to review the outline in a moment. First wanted to note a couple of things. First, no, this is for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at it yet, it's about a 150-page report. So we feel it's a fairly comprehensive examination of T&D reliability in New York. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, we hope you do get a chance. Regarding the table of contents, which you see here, I wanted to give a few examples that sections B, C, and D, or the three sections after the introduction. I wanted to give folks an idea of what you might find in these sections, sort of the meat of the report again, so to speak. Then we'll move on to the final section. In the transmission system reliability section, we detail the history of transmission reliability in the United States. We also define transmission system reliability through two key metrics, resource adequacy and transmission security. We define and describe those. We describe the major actors involved in regulatory oversight of transmission systems. So those are the types of things you'd find in section B. In section C on transmission system planning, in this section, we frame the two main types of transmission planning, reliability and economic. We describe those. We also describe the NYSO's comprehensive system planning process and the NYSO's interconnection process in some detail. And we also describe in detail the interregional planning process in New York related to the NYSO, New York State in general. In section D, the distribution system reliability section, we first describe the utility service territories. We define and describe the standard distribution system reliability metrics in New York. And in this section, we also detail historically the frequency of distribution system outages by utility. So we provide some statistics. And then finally, we also describe the reliability improvements undertaken by utilities in recent years to perform on these performance metrics. I'm not going to go into sections E, F, and G, but again, hope folks have a chance to read through the report, and we're going to skip now to the final section on issues that we've identified. Next slide. So I wanted to stop on this slide for a moment before we proceed to frame this final section and also for a quick reminder. For framing, note that Carl Moss at the September board meeting, he indicated that the energy plan and the T&D study offer an opportunity for, and key word here, synthesis. And as for a reminder, as we move to this final section, this report provides a synthesis of existing processes and studies and speaks to the challenges that state entities may be currently addressing and need to continue to address. Next slide. So again, we've got 6 issues here and I've got one slide. We have one slide per issue. So we're going to briefly go through these. These are, again, T&D reliability issues that we think folks should be aware of going forward. The first involves load growth uncertainty. So what we're saying here is that while planners have always had to deal with load growth uncertainty, right? That's not new. But we believe that projecting load has gotten much more challenging in recent years, driven by 2 key factors. I think we all know what they are: the continued electrification of the grid and the growing number of large loads showing up in the interconnection queue. So given this growing uncertainty, what we're saying here on this slide or regarding this issue is that it's more important than ever that the system operators develop strategies that remain adaptable across a broad set of potential futures, and that robust scenario planning will become increasingly important as we move forward. Would note, though, that we're already seeing some of this, and it's occurring to a certain extent, for example, in the state's integration analysis work and in some of the NYSO planning work. Next slide. So the next issue is accessing the full value of demand response. We believe that demand response resources have the potential to provide significant value and reliability, given the flexibility and responsiveness that they can offer. But we acknowledge unlocking the full value will require careful coordination, telemetry, and market design. And there will be, without doubt, challenges to address and to overcome. And this is not a new issue. But what we are saying is that we need to be vigilant here with this issue and keep working on it because the stakes are high. And we want these resources to provide their full range of potential benefits to the grid. Next slide. Issue number 3, delivering timely and cost-effective solutions. So what we're saying here is that one significant challenge that we face, I think we're all aware of, is that capacity additions will need to keep pace or outpace load growth and resource retirements to ensure that resource adequacy is maintained. This is obviously very important, a key challenge. And on this front, on the slide and also in the report, we've identified some key barriers that we need to continue to work on this issue. I'm just going to briefly mention them. Interconnection backlogs and delays. The NISO is working very hard on this, to integrating FERC Order 2023 and the elements of that order. There are permitting challenges. This is partly addressed by the RAPID Act, but challenges remain. I think we're aware that there's been in recent history supply chain disruptions, notably things like critical equipment like transformers. And we've seen workforce shortages. Demand for skilled workers is outpacing supply. And we believe these are all challenges we all need to work on. Next slide. I believe this is, yes, this is issue number 4. We're saying here, this issue, we need to align markets and planning processes to maintain reliability. So we're saying that integrating high volumes of renewable energy will require balancing across timescales. This is a challenge, and this is necessary to ensure that electricity supply is always adequate. We've further defined this balancing challenge into 3 buckets or slices: sub-hour balancing, hourly and intraday balancing, and intraday and seasonal balancing. And in the report and on the slide, we provided examples of ongoing and our potential future efforts to address these challenges, which I'm not going to go over each one, but I wanted to highlight the one at the end, intraday and seasonal balancing. We think this, in part at least, speaks to the need for, and we've all aware of this acronym by now, I think, DFRs, or dispatchable emission-free resources. We've all seen multiple studies, multiple analyses that have found we need a significant amount of these resources over time. And what we are further saying is that New York should continue to investigate the availability of DFRs as it is already doing in the DPS 0 by 2040 proceeding. Next slide. Issue number 5 of 6, evolution of planning practices. This issue speaks to the fact that what are called advanced transmission technologies, or ATTs, another acronym, are valuable as flexible and potentially easily deployable transmission solutions. So first, what are ATTs? Well, ATTs are technologies that can optimize the use of existing infrastructure and defer or reduce the need for major transmission expansion. The report, and I think the slide as well, may list specific examples of these technologies. I'm not going to detail those here in the interest of time, but encourage you to look at the report. But what we are saying is that planning processes should assess, or in some cases continue to assess, ATTs on equal footing with traditional transmission solutions. A couple other things to note very quickly on this slide, which I won't go into any detail on, but something else we note is we discuss the importance of both A, interregional coordination, and B, coordination between electric and gas system planners. We feel both of these coordination efforts are important to contributing to reliability in different ways. Next slide. I believe this is the last issue that we've identified. The need to increase system resilience to extreme weather events. So the issue here is that we believe operating the system reliably will become more challenging as the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events increase. And we're saying that system planners need to consider how to address these challenges. And in the report, you'll find examples of items, recent ongoing activity to address some of it. Like, for example, we mentioned some recent storm hardening efforts in the report. Examples are the Resiliency Planning Law, or Public Service Law 6629, and also the NISO's work to update capacity accreditation for firm fuel resources to help ensure performance during winter peak periods. So those are some ongoing efforts. One other thing we say here is that we think that system planners should explore the adoption of supplemental probabilistic resource adequacy criteria, criteria beyond the standard LOLE, or loss of load expectation criteria. We believe this could help planners better anticipate and prepare for a wider range of weather outcomes. And this may be important, particularly important, as New York's electricity system becomes more reliant on weather-dependent renewables. Next slide, please. Thank you. And Chair Harris, I'm going to pass it back to you. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Certainly, this study does reinforce the criticality of reliability and makes it clear that we need to be vigilant to make sure that new resource additions keep pace with load growth and resource retirements in the coming years. Chris highlighted some challenges on this issue, including interconnection timing, permitting, supply chain issues, and workforce shortages, to name a few. And the energy plan calls on us to continue to work on these issues in the coming years. I think in the longer term, I also agree that with the study findings that better interregional coordination, including consideration of newer transmission technologies and more market participation from demand response, will be critical to achieving public policy objectives at the least cost while keeping the lights on. And it is important to note that there are recurring planning processes in place to ensure that reliability is maintained, including in the NISO's comprehensive reliability planning process, the PSC's comprehensive grid planning process, which proactively plans for system needs driven by public policy requirements in a coordinated manner on both the bulk and distribution systems. In addition, Chris's presentation echoes what we have heard at earlier board meetings regarding the need to invest in upgrading aging infrastructure, including our electric transmission and distribution system. I want to underscore that this need is imperative to meeting reliability needs for any energy pathway that the state will walk down. You may recall during our last meeting in which we discussed the pathways modeling for this plan. And to remind you, the analysis showed that New York's citizens and businesses will need to invest over $100 billion each year in the energy system, no matter which future path we take. So that's an important undercurrent of this work, the investments that we make irrespective of our policy. Certainly, future investments should incorporate technological advancements that would facilitate an increasingly diverse mix of generating sources. However, most of the needed investments are designed to modernize our energy system to meet our needs in the decades to come. So with that, I will now open it to the board for a brief discussion before we move this to a vote. I can expect one particular member might want to weigh in. Rich?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Harris, and thank you, Chris, for that overview. At the New York ISO, we spent a lot of time doing very similar reports and studies, and a lot of the findings and conclusions that came out of this report are very consistent with the work that we have done as well. So we're both supportive of the findings and the recommendations, and satisfied and comforted that two sets of very talented teams will look at these problems and come up with very similar findings and results. So it gives me confidence and comfort that the inputs into the plan are solid, and we're supportive of it.
Thank you. And Chair Christian?
Thank you. Chris, thank you for the presentation. Appreciated the depth and detail that you and your team went into putting this together and presenting today. Very much appreciate you highlighting the significance of the load growth, both through large loads coming onto the grid, but also through our efforts to electrify and decarbonize the system. Highlighting how that is impacting our planning needs, I think, is very important. And I appreciate how you highlighted that front and center. It's integral to the efforts underway through the commission to address grid reliability and resiliency, particularly through the Grid of the Future proceeding, as you mentioned. And I think highlighting the importance of long-term planning, again, I want to echo Richard Dewey's point about the alignment of the results and the similarity of the findings. I think that helps to highlight that we're looking at things in a way that is consistent and driven in the right direction towards delivering the results New Yorkers are going to need to have the system we need to meet our future needs. So I want to thank you for the hard work you've put into making this happen, and looking forward to future results.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Do other members have questions or comments before we move this to a vote? Assemblymember Barrett?
I just wanted to share an observation. I mean, this was very dense and we kind of got it at the last minute, so I can't say I fully embrace and understand the whole study, but as representing constituents directly, I feel like it's really important that we consider how we're educating the public about the transmission and the storage steps, particularly storage. I think there's a lot of concern and a lot of questions, and that's something that we, that I hope that we're going to integrate into however we move forward with these things. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I couldn't agree more. These are extraordinarily complex topics, and one of the things that we'll put into place is some of the educational needs this fall, in particular, during the comment period, not just on this study, but frankly on the plan writ large. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. I'll now request a motion and a second on Resolution 15 to approve the supplemental transmission and distribution study. May I have a motion approving the resolution authorizing the approval of the supplemental transmission and distribution study, please? And a second?
Second.
The motion's carried and the supplemental transmission and distribution study is approved. The study will be available on the Energy Plan website shortly. Thank you, Chris. Oh, all in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion's carried. And the supplemental transmission and distribution study is approved. The study will be available on our Energy Plan website shortly. Thank you, Chris, again. Next slide, please. Moving to our next agenda items, today we will continue to hear from agency staff who will provide updates on the substantive topic areas being developed for the draft state energy plan, consistent with the scope that this board approved at our March meeting. Today we will hear from staff leading the development of several plan topic areas. For each, the presenters will provide an overview of the key themes and potential strategic recommendations. Next slide, please. Up first are Colleen Smith-Lemon, Associate Transportation Analyst from the New York State Department of Transportation's Office of Policy, Planning, and Performance, and Adam Reuter, NYSERDA's Director of Clean Transportation, who will together present on the topic of transportation. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions after Colleen and Adam's presentation. I'll hand it over to both of you with my thanks.
Thank you so much. Next slide. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. As Doreen indicated, my name is Colleen Smith-Lemon. I'm from the New York State Department of Transportation, NYSDOT, and I'm joined here today by Adam Reuter from NYSERDA. So Adam and I have been co-leading the development of the transportation chapter, along with other state agencies, of this plan. And it's fitting that this chapter has co-lead agencies, because one of the things we'd like to really kind of emphasize is it really takes collaboration and coordination amongst multiple agencies and other entities to really achieve some of our mid and long-term range energy goals related to the transportation sector. Notably, our state needs a transportation sector that meets the mobility needs of our residents, as well as addresses energy efficiency and emission reductive objectives. Now, New York already has one of the most energy efficient transportation sectors in the country, due mostly to a large percentage of transit and public transportation downstate. We really need to keep up the momentum and improve our programs across relevant areas across the state, while identifying opportunities to further transform the sector. Now, as the slide indicates, the strategies and recommendations that our agencies have developed collectively will help transform our transportation sector into one that is cleaner, more affordable, reliable, and also address other quality of life issues while minimizing emissions and promoting sustainable land use. Now, these strategies very much align with other themes that are within the energy plan chapters, but it's also very much in line with other relevant planning efforts, such as the 2050 New York State Transportation Master Plan that is currently being developed and finalized by NYSDOT. Full disclosure, I am the project manager for that plan. Shameless plug. The draft Transportation Master Plan is promoting a community-centered, long-range vision for our state transportation system, and includes goals related to providing more transportation options, a reliable and resilient network, and also a cleaner environment. I very much can say that the development of these two plans jointly have very much provided a certain amount of synergies. Next slide, please. Now, as on this slide sort of emphasizes, one of the biggest points, I think, in the transportation chapter that's revealed is that investing in a variety of different transportation options and services, sort of getting beyond the single occupied vehicle, is sort of necessary to reduce emissions within the sector, as well as impact in a positive way quality of life for our communities, as well as to meet the mobility needs of our residents. Specific recommendations related to this, as the slide reveals, includes the expansion of public transit offerings, modernization of transit fleets to improve convenience, transitioning to zero-emission transit vehicles, as well as supporting shared mobility services, such as microtransit, as well as bike shares, just an example. These options really provide another sort of more affordable method for folks to access services, get to schools, get to their jobs with a variety of communities, particularly communities with limited fixed route transit in more remote areas. Now, as there are quite a few kind of existing or programs underway, but also programs that are sort of more in a pilot status that are trying to help expand these transportation options across the state. Some of the examples of which are listed on the left side of the slide. I'll just quickly run through a couple of them just to highlight what we're talking about in terms of some of our efforts and our opportunities to further expand our programs and learn from some of our pilots. So the Zero Emission Transit Transition Funding Program is a new competitive grant program that's administered by NYSDOT. It's intended to help non-metropolitan transit area downstate transit providers acquire zero-emission transit vehicles and associated charging fueling infrastructure across the state. In addition, the NYSDOT Public Transit Modernization Enhancement Program provides funding for counties, cities, and regional authorities to enhance their public transportation services through projects such as vehicle rehabilitation and replacement, deployment of new technologies, as well as passenger amenity upgrades to really improve service conditions and encourage more transit and public transportation use. And now the NYSERDA, shameless plug, the NYSERDA Clean Mobility Program helps fund planning and demonstration projects that showcase potential transportation options for connecting users to public transit, such as bike shares and ride shares, while the Clean Transportation Prize Initiative awards funding to really innovative projects that upgrade transportation systems to reduce pollution and enhance electrification. Again, another NYSDOT initiative, which is relatively new, the Innovative Transit Mobility Pilot Program. This is really designed to assist riders who face barriers to what's really the traditional public fixed route public transportation. This program will fund 2 microtransit pilot projects for each of the 7 largest non-MTA systems. This program, since it is a pilot, it's really the intent is going to provide us with more information on how we can really effectively expand the service in different contexts across the state. So I really think there's lessons learned within that, particularly in more remote, rural, and even suburban areas. And of course, we all know what the 511 New York program is. It's sort of a one-stop shop website and service that helps New Yorkers to easily plan vehicle and transit trips. But 511 New York is just one aspect of a new broader NYSDOT statewide mobility service program that we're sort of moving ahead on. This program really, it works with communities and employers to address their mobility concerns by offering technical assistance for programs such as bike shares, carpooling, interfaces within an employer setting, and other custom solutions. Now, notably, also another recommendation on the slide, last but not least, Okay. It calls for enabling more walking and bicycling opportunities. Related to this, NISDOT is in the process of developing an active transportation strategic plan to improve walking, bicycling using micromobility or using wheelchairs on roadways maintained by NISDOT. This plan will really provide guidance for our agency when it comes to active transportation investments and improvements. Next slide. The other thing I just really wanted to reiterate also is all of these recommendations really require partnership on, state and local level in order to ensure that accessible transportation considerations are incorporated in community planning efforts. Collaboration is key. Next slide.
Thank you, Colleen. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Reuter, Director for Clean Transportation at NYSERDA. And in addition to providing the efficient and clean and affordable transportation options that Colleen just discussed, New York must also take steps to run the transportation sector on cleaner fuels. The primary pathway for this is transportation electrification. Fortunately, New York is already actively pursuing this strategy. We've already committed nearly $3 billion in investments into transportation electrification. Expanding the availability of charging options is a key element of the state's transportation electrification strategy and relies on collaboration between state agencies, between state and local governments, and between the state and the private sector. Moving forward, the transportation chapter puts forward recommendations to continue successful approaches to expanding charging station build-out for both level 2 and fast charging stations, with a focus on those types of locations that have the highest impact on EV adoption, such as multifamily buildings and fast charge hubs in urban areas and along major highways. The chapter also calls for expanded collaboration across agencies to improve user experiences and consistency across our funding opportunities. Chapter notes plans to expand opportunities for medium and heavy-duty EV charging through the continuation of the PSC's medium and heavy-duty make-ready proceeding and targeted opportunities to support shared public and depot charging hubs. NYSERDA has found that supporting school bus fleets with electrification planning studies has been extremely valuable, and we look to expand that program to truck fleets as well. And we aim to develop electrification roadmaps for certain segments of the transportation sector, such as the construction industry, to help identify opportunities and barriers that need to be addressed to electrify those market segments. Next slide. To accompany an expansion of charging infrastructure and to counteract rollbacks at the federal level, New York is continuing to fund programs like the Drive Clean rebate for passenger EVs, the school bus incentive program for electric school buses, and the truck voucher incentive program for electric trucks and other types of buses. These programs save New Yorkers and New York businesses money. Just in the last few weeks, and even just yesterday, in fact, we announced additional funds for both the school bus and the truck and our truck programs. The transportation chapter recommends continuing to focus funding for medium and heavy-duty vehicles in market segments where zero-emission solutions are commercially available and can benefit from incentives today, while phasing in more market segments as the technology and economics evolve. There are also opportunities to focus on other elements of the transportation sector, such as funding demonstrations in hard-to-electrify areas. And New York, we recommend considering opportunities to support e-bikes, especially in low and moderate income communities and for groups like delivery workers whose use of these bikes can have major impacts on expanding clean transportation in cities. Next slide, please. The transportation chapter also focuses on other elements of our transportation energy use. There are opportunities to lessen the impacts EVs have on the electric grid, for instance. Encouraging the use of managed charging and vehicle-to-grid technology can ensure that as more EVs charge, they increase utilization of existing assets and don't cause electric rates to increase in the way that uncontrolled charging might. Ensuring New York State has the workforce it needs to create and operate a cleaner transportation sector is important, and we can build on our initial successes. A recent NYSERDA report found that EV industry jobs in New York grew 38% between 2021 and 2023, And with some expanded programs, we know we can do more. Transportation chapter also notes the role that lower carbon fuels can play in reducing our dependence on petroleum products and our emissions. Advancing the technology needed for a hydrogen economy through R&D and demonstrations will enable further decarbonization of the transportation sector. And some hard to electrify segments of the transportation sector will also benefit from using bio-based fuels like renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, and renewable natural gas. And it's important to remember that there will be internal combustion engines on our road and in aviation and maritime operations for many years to come. These alternative fuels provide opportunities to make an immediate impact on emissions and fuel diversity. In summary, the transportation chapter builds on the energy efficient transportation system New York already has and provides recommendations to expand affordable, clean options for all New Yorkers. This will require collaboration between agencies, with local governments, and with the private sector. By fine-tuning our existing programs and adding new ones as needed, we will enable a better quality of life and more economic opportunity for New Yorkers.
Thank you both. We have a few minutes for any questions or comments. I'll ask Commissioner Dominguez if she had any feedback to provide to kick us off.
Well, I just want to say, first and foremost, a big thank you to Colleen and to Adam for providing a very robust picture of exactly what we're doing here in New York State and what the opportunities are in the future moving forward, both programmatically and the connection directly to our energy usage. One thing that I would ask is a large part of this is dependent on engagement with the public on how we do this. And so any additional comments that you might provide and that robust nature of our engagement with New Yorkers across the state.
Thank you.
As you know, Commissioner Dominguez, we're in the middle of our transportation master plan process, and part of that process involved in the beginning robust public engagement and going into communities directly and transit areas to really engage and get a better sense, at least from our perspective, what the state, across the state in many different communities, what folks were feeling in terms of how they wanted the transportation system to work for them. So I think that sort of helped us inform both the transportation master plan as well as the state energy plan. And very much so part of the process with the state master plan was really looking at some of our, existing laws in terms of obviously related to climate, but also some of our open space preservation efforts, and also obviously informed by the state energy plan.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. And thank you, Commissioner Dominguez, for your leadership in the space. One thing I was just reflecting on as I was listening, and especially with, it's hard to ignore the fact that when we started this process, we had different regulations in place, certainly at the department regarding advanced clean cars and advanced clean trucks. And in just thinking about, we know that this is a difficult nut to crack and a really important one, and how we think about how we prioritize different actions. Something that we have seen through our air quality monitoring or different work is just how much the transportation sector, and in particular diesel trucks, can really cause air quality challenges in communities, and especially in disadvantaged communities. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to really think about how we can prioritize strategies that would take, diesel trucks before 2010, before we have the emission standards that we have in place now, off the road, and really try to prioritize some different strategies that would have those multiple benefits, particularly focusing on air quality improvements. So just a reflection that perhaps we can talk about over time. And thank you very much for your great work on this.
Any brief feedback, Adam, before we move on? I'm being told.
Sure. I think we are, we've worked closely with DEC on this matter through spending of the Volkswagen settlement funds, and have just replenished the money on our truck program with a focus on fleets in disadvantaged communities and fleets that are willing to scrap older vehicles and get them off of the road, not just continuing an operation, and look at ways that we can engage with the private sector to really lean into what's working and get as many of those older diesel vehicles off the road and replaced with cleaner ones.
Well, thank you both for that presentation. It actually, Commissioner Lefton's question dovetails nicely into a couple of topics we're about to cover with 3 consecutive presentations on cross-cutting topics. Yes, cross-cutting topics, after which the board will have an opportunity to ask questions before we take a mid-meeting break. So first, we'll hear from Amanda Stevens, Senior Project Manager on NYSERDA's Environmental Research Team, who will present on climate change, adaptation, and resiliency. Second, Samir Radade, Climate Justice Advisor on NYSERDA's Energy and Climate Equity Team, will present on environmental and climate justice. And finally, Michael Morris, Assistant Deputy Secretary for Local Government at the Department of State, and Sarah Osgood, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs at NYSERDA, will present on government collaboration. Amanda, please kick us off.
All right, thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank the entire team who worked on this chapter with me, especially my co-lead, Maureen Leddy at Department of Environmental Conservation. So this chapter on climate change, resilience, and adaptation is really meant to set the stage for the other chapters in the plan. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the broader context in which this plan is set? It begins with a brief look at trends in the state's greenhouse gas emissions and a brief overview of the Climate Act goals. And then drawing from the from the New York State Climate Impacts Assessment, the chapter provides highlights of projected changes in the state's climate and discusses key hazards to New York's energy system resulting from those climate changes. We discuss climate action in terms of mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, including actions already taken by New York State and broad strategies that could be taken in the future to better prepare the state and its communities for climate change. I'll note that most of the specifics on potential resilience and adaptation options were actually incorporated into the specific topical chapters, so we don't go into detail in this particular chapter. So a few takeaways. First, New York State must prioritize both reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and investments in resilience measures to prepare New Yorkers for the impacts of climate change. The state must continue to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to help reduce the severity of climate change. The scientific community has stated that substantial reductions in greenhouse gases by the middle of the century will be required to minimize the risk of severe climate impacts. Assessment of climate projections shows significantly higher impacts to New York State from a high emission scenario when compared to a lower emission scenario. But at the same time, we are experiencing the impacts of climate change now and will continue to into the future. So given that, adaptation and resilience efforts and investments are equally as important as mitigation measures. Planning processes like this state energy plan provide an opportunity to rise to these challenges. Next slide, please. The state's clean energy policies have already reduced emissions. The energy sector contributes 76% of total greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. And I'll note that in this context, the energy sector includes not only electricity, but also buildings and transportation. Emissions in this sector have declined 18% since 1990, and current and new policies in the state are laying the groundwork for more significant economy-wide emissions reductions. Next slide, please. Climate change is often seen as a threat multiplier, which means that the effects of climate change can exacerbate non-climate related impacts on the state's energy system. Layering a changing climate on top of factors like shifting energy demands, aging infrastructure, and existing disparities will increase the risks to the system and communities. So in addition to preparing for the direct impacts of climate change, addressing these non-climate factors will also help reduce the severity of those impacts. Next slide. Last takeaway to mention here today, actions to adapt to an already changing climate are essential to building a more resilient energy system now and in the future. Future climate change should be considered in all aspects of energy system and planning and design. Research can help us better understand the risks and emerging technological resilience strategies that will be needed. As we move through this energy system transition, the state has an opportunity to identify and implement new approaches that will increase resilience to both current severe weather and to future climate conditions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Are we transitioning? Okay. I'm Samir Ranade. I'm a senior advisor for climate justice on NYSERDA's Energy Climate Equity Team. Chair Harris, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present on the environmental and climate justice chapter of our state energy plan. In my presentation today, I'll start with background and then cover our chapter's 7 findings and their associated recommendations. Next slide. To start, our chapter recognizes that disadvantaged communities face cumulative burdens, like exposure to pollutants from roadways, electric power plants, industrial activities and waste management operations, and greater vulnerability to potential climate risks like heat waves, floods, sparse trees and vegetation, and long drive times to urgent medical care. These environmental burdens and risks are compounded by population characteristics and health vulnerabilities, like high rates of poverty and unemployment, historical redlining, limited English proficiency and internet access, lack of health insurance, frequent ER visits, and low birth weights. Addressing these burdens requires a cross-cutting, multidisciplinary approach. As a key part of these integrated efforts, clean energy can be a tool for justice. Let's look at how. Weatherization and other emissions reducing efforts cut energy use, saving money. Clean energy protects air quality and human health by avoiding fossil fuel combustion. This reduces harmful pollutants like soot, toxic gases, metals, and chemicals that lead to smog, acid rain, and health problems. Clean energy is also a powerful engine for economic growth. To ensure equity, opportunities in the clean energy economy can be made accessible to those historically excluded, such as minority and women-owned business enterprises and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. Finally, when clean energy programs are designed through meaningful collaboration, they can advance community priorities, healthy homes, efficient transit, good jobs, and economic development. Next slide. So our first finding highlights the importance of meaningful community involvement in clean energy projects. Community-led and community-involved projects are an important avenue to give New Yorkers a direct stake in the transition. They support the tangible growth of a local clean energy economy and can bring benefits like cost savings, good jobs, cleaner air, and small business development. Our recommendations include supporting the technical and operational capacity of community-based organizations with a strong track record serving disadvantaged communities. We also recommend continued emphasis on Indigenous nation consultation for energy generation and storage projects of 25 megawatts or greater in size, which may affect Indigenous nation interests. And this is important for many reasons, acknowledging historical displacement and ongoing socioeconomic and health disparities. Our state's disadvantaged communities criteria include every census tract with state and federally recognized Indigenous nation controlled territory. This is also consistent with Rapid Act requirements and agency engagement protocols. Next slide. So This finding emphasizes that inclusive outreach is key to increasing participation in clean energy programs and meeting the state's target of occurring at least 35% of the overall benefits of clean energy investments in disadvantaged communities. The type of existing state actions shown have dramatically improved our outreach, but as found in our state's disadvantaged communities barriers and opportunities report and reflected in the recent insights from the 12 Clean Energy Hubs regional assessment and barriers analyses, our outreach still leaves knowledge gaps that limit participation and the ability of New Yorkers to fully benefit from clean energy. We can do more to meet New Yorkers where they are, build a meaningful local presence, and ensure adequate translation services. Our recommendations focus on intentional, inclusive, creative, and culturally competent outreach to bridge those gaps. Next slide. This finding addresses procedural equity, ensuring fair, transparent, and inclusive policy and funding processes where all stakeholders can meaningfully participate. As reflected in the significant existing state actions, procedural equity aligns with New York State's commitment to engaging disadvantaged communities in helping shape policies and programs at every stage, from ideation through implementation. This ultimately improves access to clean energy services and benefits. We recommend continuing to build the capacity of state entities to support disadvantaged community stakeholders in early stage program and regulatory design, increasing the participation of the full multidisciplinary range of stakeholder groups, such as those focused on the social determinants of health, making policy materials more accessible, and conducting dedicated supplemental public engagement during energy-related public comment periods to ensure all impacted communities are prepared to participate meaningfully in them. Next slide. This finding is about how clean energy investments can catalyze economic development and job creation, especially in disadvantaged communities which often suffer from disinvestment. These investments can support education, create quality job opportunities, and stimulate growth in businesses facing barriers to competition. Our recommendations are to align workforce development programs across state agencies, authorities, and other entities to close equity gaps in job access. This could involve SUNY, Empire State Development, the Department of Labor, NYPA, and NYSERDA, including the regional clean energy hubs. We also propose continuing to integrate on-the-job training and strong labor standards into clean energy infrastructure projects, and to explore how we can build on successful models that support supply chain sourcing from MWBEs and SDVOBs. And this includes improving coordination, vendor database management, and targeted outreach to these businesses. Next slide. So this finding addresses how air pollution from fossil fuel combustion disproportionately burdens disadvantaged communities. Pollution sources include combustion in homes and commercial buildings and at industrial facilities. New York still relies on some aging, inefficient fossil fuel power plants. In addition, freeways, waste transportation, diesel bus depots, logistics centers, and warehouses are disproportionately sited in low-income neighborhoods, bringing heavy traffic and elevated vehicle emissions. These exposures are linked to asthma, heart disease, and increased mortality. We recommend placing more emphasis on tailored, locally focused clean energy projects that can strategically target harmful air pollution sources, prioritizing and scaling the recommendations of the community advisory committees established by the Community Air Monitoring Program is a critical way that we'll achieve this. And I'll note that this work supports compliance with Section 7.3 of the Climate Act, which requires state agencies to prioritize greenhouse gas and co-pollutant reductions in disadvantaged communities and avoid new burdens. Next slide. So this finding underscores that weatherization and bill assistance programs are foundational to energy affordability. This is especially urgent for low-income New Yorkers as federal support is uncertain for energy assistance and social safety net programs. Improving building envelopes with insulation, air sealing, and efficient lighting and appliances improves health, safety, comfort, and lowers energy bills. New York has one of the oldest housing stocks in the country, with many homes lacking insulation and efficient appliances. Some also contain mold, asbestos, and lead, and structural deficiencies that must be addressed before retrofits can begin. And these conditions are often worse in low-income households. Our recommendations build on ongoing efforts to overcome barriers to weatherization and electrification, like high upfront costs, repair needs, and complex processes through targeted interventions, expanded outreach, and holistic implementation. We also stress the importance of clean transportation access, expanding programs to reach more transportation deserts is vital for health, affordability, and economic mobility. Next slide. And just note here, our final finding highlights the need for interagency collaboration. This can improve the experience of residents and stakeholders. A more coordinated approach could include simplified cross-program applications, synchronized public engagement to avoid duplication. So our recommendations support streamlining, universal applications for overlapping populations, and better leveraging of clean energy resources. We also propose expanding the participation of state agencies and authorities in the Energy Equity Collaborative, which is a key interagency community partnership led by NYSERDA with 8 state entities currently involved, including many members of this board. And as the presence grows, so will our ability to form more fruitful community partnerships within the collaborative. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Chair Harris.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris and the board. My name is Michael Morris. I am the Assistant Deputy Secretary for Local Government at the Department of State. I am a co-lead on the Government Collaboration chapter of the State Energy Plan with Sarah Osgood to my right. She is the Vice President for Governmental and Regulatory Affairs at NYSERDA, and our colleagues Laura McLean, a Director at the Department of State with the Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure, and Caroline Reese, a Senior Project Manager at NYSERDA. In addition to our agencies, our chapter team consisted of members representing the Departments of Environmental Conservation, Public Service, and Transportation. Next slide, please. Government collaboration is an essential part of energy systems planning, from local governments to regional planning bodies, indigenous nations, and the federal government. The success of New York's clean energy transition depends on a robust collaboration across all levels of government. The coordination streamlines energy and climate planning and enables decision-making that appropriately considers economic growth, long-term resilience, and benefits to disadvantaged communities. Our first finding in our chapter is that the state's steadfast commitment to its energy policy and climate goals has promoted coordinated energy planning and development across all levels of government, spurred innovation, and created resources and tools that enable New Yorkers to best plan for the future. Next slide, please. A core principle of the State Energy Plan is that every New Yorker deserves access to safe, reliable, and affordable energy, which leads us to our second finding, that local governments play a critical role in comprehensive energy planning and enhancing community resilience. In this part of the chapter, we explored key roles of local governments, including land use planning and zoning, facility siting and permitting, building and energy codes, local transportation planning, and local government energy leadership. As a result, we've identified 3 recommendations. The first is to empower local governments to make informed decisions by increasing accessibility to climate and energy data. Local governments benefit from having streamlined processes for accessing resources and supporting data collection and analysis. Improving accessibility to these resources and making good, actionable information readily available will enhance decision-making at the local level. The state should assess how to seamlessly integrate data refinements into these tools, from coordinated scientific research and monitoring programs to socioeconomic analyses and more, so that current information is always available to constituents. The next is to encourage adoption of municipal clean energy policies attuned to local conditions. By supporting and incentivizing comprehensive planning, municipalities can assess various locations and energy development scenarios that help to ensure zoning regulations, environmental reviews, alternatives, and findings are informed by all relevant factors. Intentional planning and zoning also facilitate the development of renewable energy options by having transparent rules and regulations. The third is to increase local capacity by providing state support and guidance for energy planning. The state should expand its training and educational opportunities for municipal officials, stakeholders, and residents to fully understand the benefits of clean energy facilities, including employment opportunities that support a just transition. Next slide, please. Here are 2 examples of how empowering local government action can be rewarding for communities. On the left is an Erie County example of how municipalities can align non-energy functions with sustainability goals. They launched Erie County Low-Income Program for Sustainable Energy, known as ECLIPSE, which brings together departments of environment and planning, social services, and public works alongside a community solar provider to integrate utility bill discounts into existing low-income assistance programs such as HEAP and SNAP. This creative use of clean energy can support the development of new community solar in Western New York, while also channeling the benefits to those who stand to benefit the most. On the right, the state designated Sunset Park Brownfield Opportunity Area positioned UPROS to partner with key government and private sector players in New York's emerging offshore wind industry. The BOA, consisting of the industrial area of the Sunset Park neighborhood of Brooklyn, included the goal to brand the area as a green business cluster by supporting businesses in the growing green economy and just transition from an extractive and regenerative economy. Since the plan was finalized, UPROS has focused on keeping industrial uses along the Sunset Park waterfront, advancing their Green Resilient Industrial District, or GRID, plan, and utilizing BOA pre-development funding to develop a supply chain feasibility analysis, a real estate and contextual analysis, and an offshore wind landscape analysis in collaboration with DOS, the New York Economic Development Corporation, and Mayor's Office of Environmental Remediation, the City Council, the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, and other relevant governmental and private industry to ensure best outcomes. UPROS's success lies in its consistent forward-thinking, community-based planning, as well as leveraging relationships such as its long-term partnerships with New York and others.
Next slide, please. So moving on to regional collaboration, here the chapter team was, as we were discussing this, we were saying there's really kind of 2 different types of regional collaboration. The first is intra-state, so regions within the state collaborating with each other. And the other is intergovernmental partnerships where there are shared goals between neighboring states and or nations. And so these partnerships are typically tailored and they evolve to meet the need of the participating jurisdictions. One key finding that we found in this section was that the state has built strong relationships that reinforce a just transition. And to build on this, we've identified 4 recommendations. The first is that the state should continue to explore partnerships to advanced energy and adaptation solutions. And this is particularly important given near-term federal policy uncertainties that we've seen. Second, the state should develop capacity and engagement strategies that specifically support cross-border issues of climate and energy planning, including government-to-government collaboration and engagement with Indigenous nations and with Indigenous peoples organizations. The third is the state should continue to collaborate with external partners to provide transparent data and reporting on health, environment, and economic outcomes of the clean energy transition. And finally, the state should continue to leverage regional partnerships to promote strategic investment, innovative technologies, to accelerate adoption, and to expand clean energy workforce opportunities. Next slide, please. Finally, closing out the government collaboration chapter with coordination at the federal level. We all know that the federal government's size and influence enable it to shape and drive national and global energy technology markets in ways that individual states just do not have the capability of. But recent changes in energy policy at the federal level have really stressed the importance for the need for continued coordination and collaboration for the benefit of New Yorkers. Recognizing the plan projects out to a 15-year horizon, the state should proactively prepare for evolving federal landscapes. Here we have two recommendations. First, the state should actively seek opportunities for federal partnership and collaboration as they arise by pursuing partnerships, but not relying solely on these to drive progress. And second, the state should advocate for its interest at the federal level by seeking flexibility in policies that preserve state sovereignty in energy decision-making. And with that, that concludes our chapter, and thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Harris.
Thank you all. I'll open it up to the board for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Can everybody hear me? Great. I just want to thank for the great collaboration that's been taking place, especially in the local government side. As we know, they are the true partners in helping to implement these types of projects and working with our local governments. And there's a good collaboration taking place on going back to Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett's comments about educating the general public and informing them about what these transitions mean for them and how it benefits in their communities.
Thank you. Any other comments or feedback?
I'll just appreciate the great presentation and collaboration on resilience, and thanks for the partnership with NYSERDA, as well as the great discussion on equity and justice and continued benefits of disadvantaged communities. So just thank you very much.
Well, thank you again for the presentations. We are planning, next slide, on a 10-minute break at this point before we finalize with a few presentations that cover several impact analyses conducted for the plan, after which we will be advancing our vote to issue the draft. So we will be back in 10 minutes with our thanks. I will now introduce our three presentations that cover several impact analyses conducted for the plan. After we hear all three presentations, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions. First, Hillel Hammer, a Senior Advisor for Policy and Analysis at NYSERDA, will present on the public health impacts. Next, Amy Bell-Pash, Project Manager for Policy Development at NYSERDA, will present on job impacts. And finally, Jeremy Magliaro, Program Manager for Environmental Research at NYSERDA, will present on environmental impacts. Hillel, please kick us off.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Hillel Hammer, NYSERDA's Senior Advisor for Policy and Analysis. I'll be presenting on our findings of the public health impact analysis of the plan. Just to mention before I dive right in, this is about the co-pollutant impacts. So that's not greenhouse gases, which we have evaluated separately as part of the pathways analysis overall. You'll see quantification of there are additional public health benefits associated with that. This is about the co-pollutants that are emitted along with those greenhouse gas emissions when we burn fossil fuels, and the reductions in them. Yeah, sorry. Is that better? Okay. Hopefully folks heard what I've said so far, or should I start over here? Okay. So again, this is not about the greenhouse gases, but rather about the co-pollutants that are emitted alongside them when we combust fuels, and the potential benefits from reducing those emissions within our communities throughout New York State. So you're seeing our methodology slide here, and I'm not going to go into all the details here, but a few things that I did want to mention. If you've seen our previous analyses, the general concept is the same. So we start from our energy policies, energy consumption, translate that into fuel consumption, and then to the associated co-pollutant emissions of all sorts. We then model how those pollutants are transformed and advected downwind to various localities all throughout the state, and resulting in concentrations in all the different locations in our communities, which we then translate into what the public health outcomes of those changes would be overall. What is new is we have a new modeling framework that was developed for us by the University of North Carolina. We call it the New York Community Scale Health and Air Pollution Policy Analysis Modeling Framework. It's a mouthful, I know, but we call it New York CHAPA for short. This was a purpose-built modeling framework. The primary reason we undertook that was to be able to better evaluate specifics of how these benefits and changes in general might play out throughout the communities in the state, and specifically within disadvantaged community areas as well. But of course, this model also gets into great detail of emissions and that whole process that I just mentioned earlier. We have evaluated 2 pollutants overall. So all of those emissions transform into different pollutants. Primarily, we're focused on PM 2.5, the fine particulate matter, which is the vast majority of the changes and the impact on health that we're projecting. We've also included, through a simpler model, EPA's COBRA model, impacts on ozone concentrations. Those we have at a higher level, so most of the detail you'll see is about PM 2.5, but we do add those totals together. Next slide, please. Just quickly to mention, you've heard our presentations on pathways, so we have several scenarios that we've looked at in terms of our energy policies. This presentation is focused on the additional actions, which is representative of the impact of the plan, and that's all relative to our no action scenario, which excludes recent, current, and future energy policies, allowing us to evaluate the overall impact of the energy policies overall. Next slide, please. We've listed some of the key findings here. I'm not going to get into all of these details because I'll be discussing them over the course of the next 4 slides or so, but a few things to mention up front. The key finding, we find the emission reductions improve air quality throughout the state with substantial public health benefits throughout the state in all communities. What you're looking at in that table presented there demonstrates some of those, a few of the high-level specific benefits that we're looking at in 2040, so towards the end of the plan period. And to the right, total cumulative benefits over the plan period from 2025 to 2040. For example, avoided premature mortality at around 9,700 cases, non-fatal heart attacks, 4,100 cases, asthma-related emergency room visits, 12,500 cases. So these are substantial benefits over the period, and as I mentioned, throughout the state. One other thing I'd like to mention here up front, the additional action which we modeled results in 30% additional benefits relative to our current policy scenario. So that demonstrates that the policies that we choose within the context of the plan can make a substantial difference beyond those overall numbers. Next slide, please. Diving into some of the details of those physical benefits, I mentioned 3 of them earlier, and they're included in this slide as well as a longer list of additional benefits. Some of them are aggregated, but you can see basically the full list of what we're evaluating in these analyses. And again, demonstrating fairly extensive benefits throughout the state for all communities. You're looking at, here are the numbers again for avoided cases in the year 2040. And you're seeing all manner of impacts of various kinds. One important takeaway here, on the right, you'll see the gray bar up top represents the fraction of the population within the disadvantaged community areas, roughly 36% of the state. This is statewide numbers that we're looking at. And the orange bars below represent the fraction of each one of those benefits within those disadvantaged community areas. And you can see that the orange bars being larger than the gray bar means that you have a greater benefit within disadvantaged community areas than the fraction of the population. This ranges from maybe 42 to 40 to 72%, 44 to 72%, roughly, varies by type. But certainly in excess in each one of them. And I'll note that that holds true not only at the statewide level, but also at more localized levels. And I'll get into some of those details as well. Next slide, please. Just to mention, this evolves, of course, over time. So as our policies are implemented and take further root, we have increasing benefits over time. So they start off somewhat lower, grow out to 2040. Worth mentioning that this doesn't end in 2040. So even if those policies remain as is, those benefits continue to grow relative to that no action over the years, even beyond 2040. And we do have in our appendix data that goes out to 2050 for folks who are interested. Next slide, please. A lot of information on this slide. I'm not going to get into all of these details, but just to give you a flavor for how this looks throughout the state, what you're looking at here is a map of the regions that we're reporting. We're reporting within each of these regions in our report. Our appendix also includes county level results and additional details. And you can see that in each and every one of these regions, we're showing benefits. You'll notice that in the bars on the right. So those show you the per capita health benefits. They vary by region. So some regions will have larger than others. It depends where the populations are and where the emissions are overall, but there's benefits in all regions, in all communities. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, higher benefits within disadvantaged community areas. Those are shown in the orange bar and the orange slices of those pies. So the pies for each one of these regions on the left, you're looking at the fraction of population within the disadvantaged community areas in the orange slice. And the next two to the right are demonstrating avoided premature mortality, avoided asthma ER visits. You can see that in each one of those cases, those orange slices are larger than that population, again, similar to what I was saying earlier in the table. So again, benefits throughout the state in all communities. Again, as I mentioned, also at smaller scales than what we're looking at here, but certainly in all regions, in all counties. Next slide, please. One last slide. This is an extensive study, and there's a lot of detail in the report, but just to give you some flavor of that, we've evaluated here our best estimate of where those benefits are coming from in terms of the sectors and subsectors that are being evaluated. And you can see this starting with the pie chart on the left. This is our statewide numbers. Roughly half of those benefits are coming from the transportation sector, mostly in the on-road and orange, non-road sectors in the yellow slice. Roughly 40% from buildings, most of that in the residential sector. Other smaller sections there included industrial emissions, electricity at roughly 5%. And that's sort of the distribution of where the emission reductions are happening and how those benefits are occurring throughout the state. We have, of course, more data more locally. Important to note here, in the middle, you're looking at how that plays out within disadvantaged community areas, and to the right in non-disadvantaged community areas. They do look fairly similar, but there are some notable differences. I'll mention electricity as one. That difference in numbers may seem small, between 6% and 4.4%. But when you account for the population differences, that means that more than double the effect, the benefit happening within the disadvantaged community areas when per capita, on a per capita basis. There are other smaller items maybe worth noting as well that might be more impactful at local scales, such as the benefits of sustainable aviation fuel that might be more noticeable in areas around airports. We do hope in the future to dig in more to some of these kinds of topics, but I'm going to stop there for brevity, and I'll be passing it on to Amy. We'll be taking questions at the end, but thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you, Hillel. Next slide, please. I'll walk us through some of the results from a jobs analysis that looked at the employment impacts that would result from our core planning scenario, this additional action scenario that Hillel just described, which, as a reminder, is current state and federal policies, as well as assumed additional investments into clean energy. So looking at this graph on the left, this projects total employment over the horizon of the plan. So looking from 2025 to 2040, the bookends of this graph and the plan, we see a 13% increase overall in employment. This translates to roughly 60,000 jobs on net. So the way we've broken it out and that we focused on is in 4 sectors. First, in buildings, which is the red share of that graph, then in electricity, the green or lime green share, and then into fuels and purple, and finally in transportation. So these 4 sectors represent the areas where we assume the most direct investment through the core planning scenario, and where we expect to see the most employment impacts. Though I'll note, through these investments, we can also expect to see stimulated growth across the economy. Next slide, please. Here I'll zoom into some of the changes we've projected at the sector level. This graph on the right shows the net change in jobs per sector. So starting in that yellow bar, looking at electricity, we see about 44,000 new jobs estimated, which is about a 32% increase over the course of the plan. Moving into buildings, around 38,000 jobs. And then looking at 2 displacement sectors, in the fuel sector, about 4,000 jobs are expected to be displaced. And in transportation, where we see about 18,000 jobs that are displaced. So I'll note, just as an overall trend, as you can see visually, the net added jobs outnumber the displaced jobs by roughly 4 times. So this is why we see that net overall growth. And something I'll also mention that's not displayed in the graph is that the growth we see in buildings and electricity is expected to begin in the early phases of the plan, so starting in 2030, whereas we do not see this displacement start until in the later years, so closer to 2035 and later on in the plan. Next slide, please. Breaking this out a little bit further, this pie chart shows us the net added jobs. So these are all the new jobs that would be created by the plan, broken out by subsector. So I know it's a little hard to see, but first, the orange and brown pie chart, it's about a third of the overall added jobs. That's in wind and solar generation, in particular utility scale solar and offshore wind. In pink, we see about 20% of these new jobs in the electricity sector, specifically in electric distribution. And then in blue, we see building decarbonization, which is largely driven by residential work, and in particular, residential shell upgrades, where we see jobs are about expected to more than double over the horizon of the plan. Next slide, please. Finally, breaking out that same chart, this time by industry. So these are still the added jobs that we're looking at. See that big, about half of these jobs are in the construction industry, which is about 45,000 added jobs over the course of the plan, as well as meaningful growth in manufacturing, about 7,500 jobs. Both of these we highlight due to the fact that they tend to be more union dense, higher paying jobs. And so we know, can trace the ways in which the investments in the additional action scenario drive high quality jobs. And this is our last slide, but before, I'll note that this is just a first step in a directional analysis to look at the impacts on employment. But in support of the final plan, we'll be building this out with further granularity, with some more occupational detail, geographic granularity, and we'll update any changes in the core planning scenario to reflect those changes here. So with that, thank you to the members of the board, and I'll hand it to Jeremy.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Magliaro and I lead the environmental research team at NYSERDA. I'll be providing a brief overview of the environmental impact chapter of the State Energy Plan. NYSERDA served as the aggregator of information for this chapter, working closely with colleagues from sibling agencies. This presentation will focus on key findings. Next slide, please. One more, sorry. As evidenced by the figure at the lower right, over the past 20 years, market forces, economic drivers, and the implementation of federal, state, and local clean energy and air quality policies have substantially reduced energy-related emissions, resulting in remarkably cleaner air. In addition to the health benefits, these emission reductions have significantly reduced acid deposition across New York State, otherwise known as acid rain. Sensitive ecosystems are slowly recovering, and many water bodies that decades ago were practically sterile are now able to support more diverse and abundant wildlife and recreation, such as fishing. These trends in air pollution reductions and associated benefits are projected to continue under each of the pathways modeled under this plan. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, NYSERDA worked closely with sibling agencies to document the suite of potential environmental impacts associated with energy development, generation, transmission, and use. State programs and policies that seek to avoid and mitigate these impacts are also documented in the chapter, which illustrates a robust regulatory framework. New York State's environmental regulations and programs are implemented to protect and maintain air quality, water resources, sensitive ecosystems and land resources, and wildlife from adverse impacts associated with the full life cycle of energy, from construction to operation to decommissioning and waste. Next slide, please. The energy modeling performed for this plan identifies increasing amounts of solar, storage, offshore wind, and onshore wind for electricity generation by 2040. Impacts from deployment of large-scale clean energy sources can include energy siting on undeveloped lands. New York State has instituted energy procurement and permitting strategies that seek to avoid or minimize land use conflicts while reducing risks to ecosystems and wildlife. Examples of these strategies include the Smart Solar Siting Scorecard and agricultural mitigation payments that seek to steer renewable energy development away from prime agricultural soils and incentivize co-utilization of those energy facilities. Another strategy example is the state's extensive environmental and fisheries data collection in the offshore environment that occurred as part of the Offshore Wind Master Plan. This suite of offshore assessments informed our understanding of environmental sensitivities and user conflicts associated with potential offshore wind areas. These types of early stage investments in siting optimization can reduce environmental and project risks, help to inform construction and permit conditions, and accelerate energy project timelines. Technical working groups comprised of key stakeholders, energy companies, and state agencies have been integral to informing and continually evaluating and refining these responsible energy development strategies. Next slide, please. Finally, the state is actively investing in research and monitoring into new and emerging technologies and fuels, energy siting and mitigation practices, and dual use opportunities. For example, New York State is funding research to produce data on the crop and grazing potential of commercial scale agrivoltaics. To balance the growth of offshore wind with commercial fishing, the state is actively supporting research on ways to maintain and grow the region's sustainable fisheries. Environmental monitoring has been integral to enabling policymakers to evaluate the effectiveness of these energy-related regulations, policies, and strategies. A continued commitment to data collection, monitoring, and evaluation will be integral to responsibly implementing this energy plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, Amy, and Hillel. I will pause for questions and discussion from the board at this time.
On the jobs analysis, where are those 18,000 jobs in transportation lost? I don't mean where geographically. I mean, what are those jobs?
Primarily in combustion vehicle servicing, so both maintenance and fossil fuels, or rather gas stations, basically. So gas stations, and some of the data that we've seen come out is that combustion vehicles require more and more frequent maintenance than electric vehicles. So overall, we see a little bit of shrinking in that maintenance facility as well. But a lot of the jobs are offset, as you can imagine, by EV charging jobs that are created.
And on the environmental impact, how does the plan imagine, or how do we now balance like a new storage facility that might have an environmental impact, but also helps us meet our climate goals, right? Like, how do we balance those things? How do we bake that into the analysis?
Well, thank you for the question. The chapter frankly doesn't get that granular. It's more of an inventory of impacts. But we reference a number of regulatory documents and environmental impact statements that do go further into that line of questioning. But I think overall, in general, the suite of regulatory programs and policies that are in place across media, from water resources to land resources to air, we found cover the full suite of potential environmental impacts that might occur from these energy facilities.
Right. Sorry. Maybe I'm not being clear. I'm asking more that sometimes when as we have to build new infrastructure, those are going to have environmental impacts. But if we have to build that infrastructure in order to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, that might net out well for us. But sometimes I think the regulatory environment is such that when those regs first came to be, it wasn't a question of whether or not we should sort of weigh in 20 years, we'll need this infrastructure, in a decade, we'll need this infrastructure. And so it's worth the short-term hit on the environmental impact because we need it for the long-term gain of getting ourselves off of fossil fuels. And how do we weigh that in the regulatory environment today as it relates to energy planning?
From what I observed in researching the chapter, I mean, each proposed development of an energy generation or transmission or any other type of energy project really seeks to avoid, minimize, mitigate impacts. So those happen at the project level. And, those broader questions of trade-offs between now and the future aren't really part of the regulatory process for those individual project decisions.
And I'd say also, if I could jump in, it's a great question. It's one of those very technical regulatory questions, but it is one that my colleagues on my left and my right take up every time we have a policy. For example, the Public Service Commission, in adopting our energy storage policy, had to look carefully at the costs and benefits of it, and including, given the fact that there's trade-offs with any resource, right? I don't know if the chair would want to weigh in, or Commissioner Lefton, but that's the trade-offs that are considered in adopting a policy.
Yeah,
and I would say that, honestly, the more complicated and nuanced answer is like a little bit of it depends also on what kind of project you're talking about and what processes it is, because large scale renewables are cited by ORES. But one such example is the department recently finalized a general permit for our wetlands law for small scale community solar, for instance, right? Saying that, we understand the need to ensure that there is an expeditious and certain process to make sure that these things move forward, or thinking about other tools within SECRA. So I think that this is a question that we always wrestle with, because I think we know just generally development in of itself has impacts, but I think generally there's different tools within the regulatory process to ensure that you're then evaluating those trade-offs. And that is essentially the purpose of those regulatory programs.
Yeah, so all three of you gave great presentations. Thank you so much. And I noticed some of the virtuous cycles you were talking about. You improve air quality, improve jobs. You really see some of not just the environmental impact, but personal health impact. And you notice some of the numbers too, like 9,700 premature deaths being avoided. And not trying to ever play stump the star, and not assuming you're a health economist, but Health and Human Services has, a dollar value for human life. I know it sounds a little bit crass, but they have one for modeling purposes. Did you happen to run out the amount of money that's being saved from a health economic standpoint? Because if you look at 9,700 human lives, that's a huge amount of money that's being saved. If you look at even just the drop in emergency department visits and all the health and benefits, there's this is a multi-billion dollar positive health economic impact, is what my mind did really quickly in my head. But nice presentation. And again, not trying to play stump the star if you didn't do that, just curious.
Actually, we do. That wasn't the emphasis of our presentation, but we've included the value in our analysis overall, and in the total BCA, I think that was presented. I can tell you the number for statewide value of health benefits from additional action was estimated at about 16 billion annually by 2040. So that should give you a sense of it. Obviously, it'll vary by
I'm
scenario.
sorry, just because I'm old and I don't hear. Did you say 16 billion?
16 billion
Okay.
annually per
Thank
year.
you.
So that's not cumulative. That's for the 1 year.
More than I make in a year. Impressive number. Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you. Okay, well, we will thank our panelists. We will move on to our next agenda item. And as described, before proceeding to a vote on the release of the draft plan, I'd like to take some time to reflect on the overall vision and direction of the plan itself. Next slide, please. Since this board convened in September of 2024, we have covered significant ground. We have heard from state and national experts on numerous critical energy policy areas, including energy systems reliability, building decarbonization, energy needs for manufacturing, and energy affordability for all New Yorkers. We have also heard from more than 25 interagency staff on the full spectrum of topics covered in the draft energy plan that we are together considering today. The energy plan addresses comprehensive energy planning objectives that ensure system reliability while balancing economic growth, affordability, decarbonization, equity, and a healthy environment. Our planning clearly builds on New York's significant progress toward a clean energy economy, such as investing in energy efficient technologies that are saving New Yorkers money, installing over 6 gigawatts of distributed solar, completing South Fork Wind, and breaking ground on Empire Wind 1, Sunrise Wind, and the Champlain Hudson Power Express transmission project. And we are planning with a constantly evolving economic context. Since 2019, the global economy has faced a number of challenges that affected our energy system. The global pandemic and its impacts on supply chains, inflation, and other productivity slowdowns created sizable impacts on energy market conditions. And as I spoke to earlier, the federal context has evolved quickly and will certainly have future impacts on how we consider our energy landscape. And this will remain an area of close analysis throughout this year as we seek to finalize this plan. Throughout this process, the board has committed and remained committed to delivering a clear-eyed, comprehensive plan for New York's energy system. To provide further insight into the strategic approach to this effort, I would like to ask Carl Maas, NYSERDA's Senior Vice President for Policy Analysis and Research, to walk us through the state energy plan's overarching direction. Carl.
Thank you, Chair Harris. And we're almost there. We're in the home stretch. So it's my great pleasure to come back and to speak to all of you again. As the chair noted before, the state energy plan serves an opportunity to take stock of our progress, calibrate the state's energy projections considering economic and political conditions, and focus our vision on the 15 years ahead. Next slide, please. Okay, so our approach to this plan has been to focus on the following 5 overarching goals. First, to ensure a reliable, resilient, and clean energy system. Second, to ensure energy affordability and equitable access for all New Yorkers. Third, to drive economic growth. Fourth, to advance energy technology innovation. And finally, fifth, to continue progress on economy-wide deep decarbonization. I'd like to spend some time talking through each of these. Next slide. So first off, we have our delivery of abundant energy. The state energy plan puts forth policy considerations to ensure that our energy system can deliver abundant, reliable, resilient, and clean energy. We will achieve this by maintaining a diverse mix of both supply resources and infrastructure. Diversity is in our energy resources allows the state to meet our energy needs while minimizing the potential impacts of energy supply disruptions and price fluctuations in any given market. The plan speaks to this in several ways. First, by underscoring New York's commitments to invest in renewables, energy storage, advanced nuclear, and transmission and distribution grid infrastructure upgrades, while also recognizing the value of existing nuclear and hydropower generating facilities. Second, by speaking to the importance of energy efficiency across fuels and end uses. In the same vein, the plan speaks to the importance of load flexibility and other demand-side resources in lowering costs and enhancing grid reliability. And finally, by acknowledging that all major fuels currently used in New York State are projected to continue to provide meaningful volumes of energy throughout the planning period. The plan emphasizes that even as clean energy resources ramp up over time, the state will maintain safe and reliable provision of natural gas and petroleum fuels. Next slide. Substantial investment will be needed to modernize aging infrastructure, as the chair previously mentioned. We also have to address hazards and support economic development. I note that we are in a time of great uncertainty in the energy sector. The analytic modeling conducted for the state energy plan reflects multiple scenarios to provide insights on a range of possible outcomes. As Chair Harris mentioned earlier today, while the energy transition may require modest incremental costs, the bulk of energy-related investments will be related to the provision of reliable energy services that we need today and that will fuel the economy of the future. That is, well over 90% of the money we need to invest in our energy system over the next 15 years will be necessary investment no matter what energy pathway we choose. To upgrade the aging infrastructure, to serve new economic development opportunities, to keep our houses warm and our lights on. The strategic energy planning and integration of advanced technologies are essential to manage costs. In support of meeting these goals, the plan speaks to the importance of enabling operational flexibility of the electric system, as well as load flexibility, integrating planning for the electric and gas systems, and continuing multi-agency energy security and emergency management efforts. Next slide. So second, I'll be speaking to the affordability issues. The plan considers affordable energy and broad access to energy efficiency and clean energy choices as essential for an equitable energy transition and to New York's continued prosperity through advancing community and economic development. Even as we know that the average New Yorker spends less on combined transportation and household energy than the average American, we know we should continue to focus on further progress in energy affordability. Furthermore, the plan notes that upfront costs of energy efficiency and clean energy choices remain barriers to access for many New Yorkers. Addressing these upfront costs is a key role for state government and state policy. Energy efficiency is foundational to state action to keep household energy costs manageable. the state can take action to reduce the upfront costs of energy efficiency and clean energy choices to lower household energy bills and improve comfort and health outcomes. The state can deliver these benefits through continued attention to market development and transformation, technology and system innovation, and incentives to offset a portion of these costs. Next slide. The state can also work to address the disproportionate burden of energy costs borne by low and many moderate income households. Advancing equity in our energy and climate actions means that New York is working to ensure that all communities, and especially people within disadvantaged communities, will benefit from the state's clean energy transition. I note that federal policy and the financial support that comes with it have been critical to energy affordability. We therefore will need to continue to assess changes and evolution in federal policies over time and understand how they can impact our projections over the next 15 years. Next slide. So third, access to reliable and affordable energy is essential to attract and develop new strategic industries to New York, as well as to maintain existing industry. Ensuring the right conditions for economic growth leads to a variety of benefits for New York, including the creation of jobs, added tax base, and other positive regional impacts. New York benefits from specific features that make it competitive for future economic development, including a skilled and educated workforce, a thriving research and innovation network, access to capital, transportation infrastructure, and plentiful water and land. The strategic industries like semiconductors and agribusiness have large energy needs and require access to reliable and affordable energy and long-term energy cost stability. As such, New York can promote economic development by meeting needs of large energy users and investing in infrastructure and programs that can attract new industry, including clean energy leaders. Once a business has established itself in New York, the state can play an important role in managing industrial emissions by reducing upfront costs of clean energy options for buildings, industrial processes, and agriculture versus via technical assistance, market transformation, targeted financial support, and innovation. The state can support the ensuing demand for new workers by investing in workforce development programs to train and retrain New Yorkers for work in the growing clean energy industry. By designing strong labor standards, the state can also ensure these jobs remain good quality jobs. Next slide. Our fourth goal is innovation. We see the advancement of energy innovation as a critical tool to enable New York's energy transition. Innovation can help reduce the cost of and increase the diversity of energy technologies and services, whether by investing in emerging technologies in New York or by bringing existing technologies from outside the state to market. New York is already uniquely situated as a clean energy innovation hub. The state's innovation ecosystem is made of extensive partnerships across the state, including research institutions, the private sector, banking, and many more. SUNY plays a pivotal role in leading this innovation ecosystem. The SUNY system is a nationally recognized leader in clean energy research and innovation, with amongst the largest university-owned clean energy patent portfolios in the country. Beyond the research phase, SUNY also offers top-notch education and workforce development programs and hosts large-scale clean energy demonstration projects across its campuses. Next slide. So finally, rounding us out with our fifth area. As Chair Harris has previously noted, clean energy faces particular external headwinds from both economic pressures and the shift in the federal government's priorities. Continued progress towards decarbonization and a clean energy economy requires a sustainable financial footing, further policy action, and new technologies. As the federal context continues to shift, the Energy Planning Board stresses the need to be clear-eyed about what timeframes are realistic. Looking ahead, New York will need to continue to develop policy solutions to accelerate our progress on decarbonization. Today, many of these investments are funded through electric ratepayers. In keeping with our laser focus on affordability, we need to diversify funding sources to enable the needed scale of investment. We will need to continue to evaluate the role of market-based policy mechanisms, which provide a price signal and generate funding that can be used to lower the cost of clean energy adoption and for affordability investments. Additionally, we will need to continue to design programs and incentives to align with market needs to maximally leverage private funds. The core planning scenario in the plan represents an ambitious but achievable pace of energy transition over the next 15 years. By 2040, this planning scenario shows us that we could achieve a 10-fold increase in zero-emission vehicle sales, shows us that heat pumps could become the primary residential space heating choice as consumers replace aging appliances, shows that continued development of renewable energy alongside forward progress on developing clean energy resources is critical, and also gives us examples such as increased use of waste-based alternative fuels that can replace fossil fuels. Achieving this level of transition will require effective implementation of policies New York State has already enacted, as well as additional actions, many of which are outlined in this plan. And it must be affirmatively stated, I think as I mentioned at our very first meeting back in September, this state transition will not be realized in isolation. It will require national markets for key technologies, alongside action from other states and support from the federal government. Setting New York on track in the 2030s to continue its progress will require further action along with development and commercialization of new technologies. As the state evaluates further action, it will need to weigh costs and benefits informed by robust input from the public to understand whether these new actions are appropriate for New York. So with that, I'll give back my time. And I also just want to take a moment to thank the 100+ staff who really labored over these many months to bring all of this before the board. It's really been an incredible process. And I want to thank the leadership within NYSERDA staff for being that synthesis group to kind of bring this together in such a coherent and clear way. So I want to thank everyone for that.
Thank you, Carl. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, when we look at it today, next slide, please. And over the last 3 board meetings, staff have presented a holistic plan for an energy future in New York. The plan is a result of collaboration and combined work of over a dozen agencies working alongside expert modeling and analytic teams. So I will not only share my thanks, but I will also say I find a lot of cause for optimism in the plan that we propose to publish for comment today. We together have learned that pursuing reasoned and informed energy policies and actions will create tens of thousands of jobs, improve health outcomes, and lower energy use and reduce bills for the great majority of New Yorkers. And at the same time, we have also witnessed that our energy policies exist within changing economic and political realities on both a national and global basis, which impact our policy and energy landscape here in New York. We know that measured at investment in our energy systems across the board will be needed for continued reliable and available energy services, but that these baseline investments need not frustrate our approaches to energy investments that increase resource diversity and provide public health and environmental improvements. And frankly, which can serve as a national model for the next generation of our energy systems as well. An abundant, reliable, affordable, clean energy system is one that will support widespread prosperity for our state, and it is our responsibility to lead New York into that future. And I know that our team at NYSERDA is committed to working with each of you and with other leaders from across state government, including the members of this board, and that we will seek those partners from our colleagues at all levels of government, federal, state, and local, as well as partners from our communities and the business sector to implement the plan. And we need feedback from the public. So I am looking very much forward to hearing from subject matter experts and community leaders from every corner of New York to inform the final energy plan, which we look forward to publishing later this year. I will speak to the details of our public comment process in just a moment. But first, I would like to open the floor to my fellow board members in turn to hear any comments you have on the draft energy plan that you have been presented with for consideration.
Thank you, Chair Harris. And this draft energy plan that we have before us today is deeply researched and a thoughtful analysis of the state's energy system and its future. In a time of uncertainty, the plan provides a solid and well-reasoned policy platform from which we can build on going forward. And from my perspective in economic development, I'd just like to highlight the increasingly important role of energy. At ESD, we hear from large manufacturers and industrial firms who tell us that access to reliable and affordable energy is one of the most important factors in deciding where to locate and grow their business. ESD routinely receives requests for more than 50 megawatts of power from companies interested in locating or expanding in New York. But those sites with that kind of capacity are in short supply, and the plan clearly acknowledges that fact. But the plan also details how the state is responding. ESD is increasingly collaborating with the Department of Public Service, NYSERDA, and NYPA to align on responsive policies and programs. For example, this year, the $300 million Power Up Fund will support the proactive development of electric infrastructure to create power-ready sites that can accommodate new commercial, industrial investment opportunities. ESD is working hand in hand with DPS on this initiative. ESD will provide economic development expertise to identify sites that are best positioned to host manufacturing operations and create jobs, while DPS will provide critical expertise in utility capital planning. It's a great example of cross-government collaboration, and we are seeing around this issue. So I'm grateful to all the partners in government who are helping plan for New York's energy and economic future, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
I'll take the opportunity to go next, if that's okay. So first, I want to echo the thanks first to you, Chair Harris, for putting all this together and orchestrating an amazing process to get this out, but also to the 100+ staff from multiple agencies involved in bringing this about. This is no small feat, and we at the Commission do many orders every month. Very rarely do they stretch to as many pages as this plan. So I know the significance behind the work just in the coordination and connectivity. So I want to thank everyone for their involvement. And with the length of the plan, that should highlight the significance and complexity that goes into planning efforts overall. This is not a simple endeavor. Requires coordination, multiple fuels, requires planning of investments and infrastructure to deliver those fuels safely and affordably, as well as significant investments in transmission and distribution system, as well as electric generation to ensure a steady and continuous flow of electricity to wherever it's needed most. Now, again, to say this is challenging is no understatement. And the reality is people are faced with the responsibility of managing the daily operation of our energy system every day. Hundreds of thousands of union employees ensure that every aspect of our system is installed and maintained in accordance with the requirements necessary to ensure safety, reliability, and continuous operation, and also to do so affordably. And those who may be unfamiliar with the process, not just from planning and operation, may view that the information they see in typical news articles suggests we aren't planning. But I'm hopeful that this and the various other planning activities will eliminate that thought and highlight the reality of the situation. These plans take time, they take effort, they take coordination and a significant amount of investment to ensure they are done right and can deliver the results that we here in New York need. And this is not our first time. New York State has been involved in energy planning at a high level for well over 50 years. And in developing these plans, the goal is, and has always been, to ensure that New Yorkers have the energy they need reliably, affordably, and safely. We mentioned earlier the acid rain, highlighting how significant an accomplishment that has been. That success is in part a direct result of past planning efforts. And that's just one of the many challenges we here in New York have overcome as a result of these efforts to date. But what makes tonight and this effort unique is that we're in a federal landscape that's shifting in previously unimaginable ways. Shifts that not only threaten our ability to address climate change and meet our energy needs, but serve to potentially negatively impact the economic well-being of the state as a whole, while limiting our ability to help New Yorkers and keep them safe, secure, with plentiful and affordable energy. And that is why this state energy plan takes on a greater meaning and significance than previous plans may have. We are in a position where we are bound not only by the laws of physics and human nature, but by the reality of a federal government that no longer supports key aspects of our previous plans. So if we are, in fact, to have an equitable and just transition to a modernized clean energy system in a manner that supports reliability, resilience, and affordability, and a quality of life and economic growth, this plan must examine those long-term considerations and strategies aligned with those goals. And we must do so while we maintain the infrastructure that has in the past served us well, while taking a focus and look and great pains to invest wisely in infrastructure that will be in our service for a long time to come. So I look at this draft plan as an important step. I look at this plan as recognizing the various ongoing efforts and their importance in helping meet our energy needs. And I know over the next few months, as we engage in public hearings, I look forward to the feedback from the various stakeholders and the input they can provide in making it even better. So thank you for your hard work.
First, I'd like to recognize the incredible team effort that went into this. First, to say thank you to the NYSERDA team for your leadership in this really significant plan, as well as, of course, the team members at DEC and many other state agencies around this table. This was a tremendous effort and really an incredible outcome thanks to the hard work of everyone. You know, we know that, of course, this energy plan is a tremendous body of work that highlights what we've accomplished here in New York and lays out a plan to meet our energy needs while remaining cognizant of the challenges that lie ahead. And while these challenges are very real, we know, as New Yorkers, of course, we need to continue to lead the nation to advance clean energy as we have for many years. And I'll say the biggest threat to New York's healthy environment and economy is the federal administration's deregulation agenda and rollbacks that have that will result in critical protections that have been in place for decades being eroded. And you know, those federal rollbacks, lawsuits, and executive orders and pronouncements seek to strip away New York's ability to implement our own environmental laws and initiatives that protect our air and our water quality, help safeguard communities from pollution, and contribute to a thriving economy. And while I agree with Chair Christensen in so many levels, when I think about an issue like acid rain, not only did it take planning, but the reason why we are no longer as concerned about acid rain as we were in places like the Adirondacks for many years is also because of regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency, which are being rolled back during this time. And those are the challenges that New York are faced with. That means that plans like this are now more important than ever as we think about what we can do with our own state boundaries to ensure that we are advancing effective regulations and planning efforts to ensure that we are continuing to meet our energy needs through clean and reliable sources. So to that end, I'm very grateful for the collaboration that went into this effort to ensure that New York continues to stand up for a strong economy, for affordability, and of course, protecting our environment and our communities that rely on it. So I very much look forward to hearing from the public on this draft energy plan and continuing the conversation with all of you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. First and foremost, again, I want to express my thanks to Chair Harris. Your steady hand is always welcome in leading us forward. And certainly this is a milestone today to get there. We haven't taken a vote, but I think we're headed in that direction. And a big thank you because as Carl pointed out, there are many hundreds of people that are involved in putting together an effort like this. And when you look at that cross governmental function, everybody kind of takes it for granted, and it's not as easy as it looks. So the fact that, you know, in such a timely way, everyone has been able to work to get us to this point, I greatly appreciate all the agencies and all the staff that's involved in doing that. We talked a lot about transportation, and it's reflected here in this draft report. It is a critical element going forward. But as we keep in mind how we advance things, not only through this energy plan, but also through the larger lens of how we move people in transportation and how we move goods, there is so much that's centered on communities and individuals and how we move people so that it's accessible, affordable transportation, reliable, safe above all, and making sure that it's energy efficient, that it reduces greenhouse gas, and it does achieve our goals as they're set out here. So whether that's through active transportation, through zero emission vehicles, through public transit, all of the elements that we're talking about here, there's content in this draft plan for people to review and to really take under consideration. We have an opportunity to really encourage the use of low energy fuels and low carbon construction materials. There's a lot of different ways that we can advance biofuels and some other things here, and really look at the transportation sector. Of course, that's what I'm going to talk about, but there's all elements of it here. And I think, again, as demonstrated by this multi-agency state energy board, we work best when we work together. So I just, again, want to say as we advance all of this, the level of coordination is extremely important to advance all of these goals. And thank everybody and our partners in private industry, nonprofit sector, et cetera, as we build out our infrastructure, both on the energy side and the transportation side, effectively, smartly, and with some very specific goals in mind here. I'll leave on this, and others have hit on it, but we're going into a process now that's really one of the most important things that we do here, which is engaging the public and really, really getting a level of understanding and information to be shared and digested. And this is heady stuff and it's important, but it's really important for us to really hear back from New Yorkers on what they're thinking. So I look forward to the next steps here. And again, thank you again, Doreen, for your leadership.
Thank you. As the Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie's appointment and the only elected official on the State Energy Planning Board, I've made it my priority to be a voice for my and my colleagues' constituents, focusing on reliability and affordability for ratepayers, even as we work to understand how best to both achieve and pay for New York's clean energy transition. Almost daily, my office hears from constituents in my district and throughout the state concerned with rising energy costs. Further, representing a largely rural assembly district in the Hudson Valley, I'm acutely aware that disadvantaged communities may look different across the state and that many communities experience poverty, brownfields, pollutants, unclean water, and air. It's important to remember that CLCPA stands for Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which means protecting all our communities and ensuring the state is bringing everyone along with us. We like to sort of say rowing in the same direction. Much has changed, as you've heard, since the legislature passed the CLCPA in 2019. And I think at this point, I'm the only person in this room who actually voted for the CLCPA. I know my colleague Walter Mosley did as well, but he's not here today. There are so much that's happened since then that we really have all alluded to and understand has changed the landscape that we're working in. 2 wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, the COVID pandemic, the supply chain breakdown and inflation, and uncertainties and challenges from the federal government, which we're all still reeling from. The current administration's attacks on offshore wind projects and recent cuts to federal tax credits to renewable energy and electric vehicles are simply unprecedented. This planning process has resulted in an extensive draft that is ultimately meant to provide a 15-year roadmap to meet the state's energy needs with the goal of achieving a reliable, affordable, and clean energy system by 2040. The public comment period for this draft plan is now open or it will be once we vote. And I urge New Yorkers in every corner of the state to weigh in and give us your feedback. I want to thank NYSERDA President Doreen Harris for her leadership and thank all of the staff. I didn't even imagine there were hundreds, but definitely all of the input here has been extraordinary. I want to thank my own staff too, who've done their share too of making their way through long documents. Everyone has worked hard the past year to get us to this point. Finally, I too want to emphasize that this public comment period in this process is where and when New Yorkers can make their voices heard. I will make sure that I reach out to all of my colleagues, and I've already drafted a document to be sure that they know what this draft plan is and that they encourage their constituents with all the schedule of hearings to participate. This is critical. This is the only way that we move forward as a state, is making sure that we're hearing and understanding what our communities care about. And that's the way that we're going to do it in the New York way. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from everybody and continuing this process with my colleagues here.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and I appreciate all the comments that have been made so far. This has been quite a thorough process. I think this draft plan is timely. I think it's practical in its recommendations. Agriculture has long been at the table. The farm community has been looking at strategic uses of farm-based energy, such as renewable natural gas and waste-based biofuels, for those hard-to-electrify processes that we find in ag, as well as some of our newer economic expansions that are happening in the state. And on many farms, after labor, the single largest cost to the farm could be energy. That's the case in many places. I believe this energy plan supports smart on-farm upgrades that allow farmers to not only reduce energy use, but also contribute to energy production by recommending implementation of conservation management best practices. I think the plan helps agriculture build on an already pretty impressive track record of reducing greenhouse gas emissions through climate smart and resilient farming practices. The timing is pretty good. Momentum is building all across our farm and our conservation district communities for the implementation of emission reducing carbon sequestration and resiliency building in our farm practices. Just in our last round of climate resilient farming program, over $33 million was awarded for farm projects reducing an estimated 120,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents across all those participating farms. Those reductions equate to removing nearly 28,000 cars off the road for a year. So I want to say thank you to the presenters. Chairman Harris used the word holistic. At our last board meeting, I used the phrase that I thought I was watching a jigsaw puzzle be put together across all the staff, various agencies, drafting a comprehensive blueprint to help guide New York State and the agriculture industry to our energy goals now and in the future. So thank you.
Well, I will add my thanks to everyone who's worked on it and to Chair Harris. And I'll be incredibly brief. I want to say that I think the plan takes risk and security seriously, and the evaluation of threats was rigorous. And I appreciate that tremendously, because sometimes in these processes, security planning can be an annex or an afterthought, and appreciate that. I want to urge all of us, and in public comment, to make sure that we are being realistic about what we can deliver and what we must deliver. I think sometimes in planning processes like this, we can allow ourselves in a back and forth with incredibly well-meaning, well-intentioned leaders to get to a place where we say, yeah, we can do that,
because it's sort of easier to say, yeah, we can figure that out in the next decade than to say, well, maybe we can't figure that out. And what's plan B and what's plan C? And so I appreciate tremendously that there is thought put into plan B and plan C and plan D, because as so many people have said, so many things have changed. And from my perspective, although we know I'm the woman who shows up on the bad day and I never get to show up on a good day. From my perspective, the worst thing that can happen to move us forward over the next several decades is for a catastrophically bad day, a day where we can't deliver power, a day where we, don't have enough, or a day where we haven't baked in the levels of resilience we need because of, penny wise, pound foolish decisions a decade earlier. And, to me, that's what sends our plan spiraling. And so working together to make sure that we just vigorously avoid the potential for those types of incidents and emergencies and crises will help us maintain over the long run a much better shot of getting where we need to go.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harris. So I want to thank everyone for helping too. I know a lot of the Department of Health staff worked out with this, and I really appreciate all they did. And it's interesting in contrast to the direction of the federal government on energy management. This draft state plan is really a breath of fresh air. It's wonderful to see where we're headed as a state. And I was just thinking about some of the healthcare savings. And when I think about the word social determinants of health that was used earlier, when we talk about social determinants of health, it's really what are the things that really improve the length and quality of our life? And it's not the things that occur in the exam room, the operating room, the delivery room, or the emergency room. Those rooms are sacred and important, but that's really not what improves the length and quality of life. It's about how do we live? Where do we live? Where do we play? Where do we work? Where do we get our education? All those social determinants of health, and air quality is such a critical issue here. And you have, the possibility of really virtuous outcomes here. If I did my math correctly, if it's $16 billion a year over 15 years, it's roughly $240 billion. The state budget this year is $254 billion. That's just healthcare savings alone, which is really substantive. And it really gets to those issues where if we're not spending money on healthcare, we have money to spend on other things that improve our health, like schools, houses, roads, bridges, all the things that we need to live a healthy life in New York. And I do think New York, in many ways, we're not really feeling the love from the federal government right now. But this is one of those things where, as a big state, we can do big things. And I look forward to seeing what the public comment is. Thank you.
I'll go. This is not an easy time to plan for a decade plus out into the future. But Governor Hochul's leadership shines in times like these. We're creating space for innovations that will help us prosper into the future, are matched with pragmatic commitments to bring reliability and affordability to New Yorkers now. I'd like to thank Chair Harris, of course, and all of the staff members, especially at the Department of State and NYSERDA, for taking up the charge to plan for a bright energy future that advances affordability, environmental benefits, and economic development opportunities. Many people don't know DOS's intersections here, but we have many contributions on this front, primarily in the area of land use, development, building design, but also consumer protection and technical support for clean energy development. Our development programs, like the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and New York Forward, actually maximizes resources to incentivize the construction and renovation of buildings to make them more energy efficient. With NYSERDA's partnership, on the technical side, we have invested $170 million in over 130 buildings across the state, reducing their energy use and carbon emissions. And our implementation on smart growth principles at the state and local level have created communities that have a variety of less energy intensive mobility options, such as walking and biking. This reduces vehicle miles, but it also helps with reducing petroleum reliance and placing different land uses closer and more accessible to one another. And the concentration of this development actually creates a critical mass of energy needs we can better plan infrastructure around, allowing for a more viable and efficient network and the ability to identify and plan for long-term renewable energy opportunities. Our Division of Building Standards and Codes assisted with the New York State Council in developing one of the most progressive energy codes in the nation. And our Utility Intervention Unit in our Consumer Protection Division helps us to keep a close eye on costs and affordability, and helps to make sure that the incentives that the state is offering are really hitting those that have real energy cost needs. This draft energy plan demonstrates how the Department of State and our partner agencies have approached energy production, use, distribution holistically and collaboratively from several different programmatic areas and policy angles. This draft plan demonstrates how New York continues to lead even in the backdrop of challenges at the federal level. And so I want to thank you all for giving us an important voice at the table. And I really do look forward to hearing from the feedback that we get out of the public participation process.
Perhaps I'll turn to Chancellor King virtually before we hear from any other speakers.
Sure. Thanks, Chair Harris, and thanks to my colleagues on the State Energy Planning Board and to everyone who has worked on the report, weighed in on the report already, and all those who will weigh in going forward. I'm excited about the plan because it is ambitious and broad in its scope, from improving the sustainability, reliability, and affordability of our state's energy system to security planning, environmental justice, clean energy jobs and economic development, public health, and so much more. And appreciate the comments other members of the board have made about the breadth of the plan. I'm particularly excited about the plan because sustainability is inextricably tied to our mission at SUNY, and I'm proud that SUNY's work is highlighted throughout the plan. We're particularly excited to join with NYSERDA and others in the work of implementation in 3 areas: adopting innovative technologies that are ready to scale, researching the innovative solutions of tomorrow, and educating the clean energy workforce. As I've mentioned in these meetings before, SUNY owns and operates 40% of New York's state-owned building stock and spends more than $200 million each year on energy. So our clean energy investments are inseparable from New York achieving climate goals and building the world-class facilities that will attract top talent. I'm proud of the progress we've made on our campuses. We've reduced gross fuel and electricity greenhouse gas emissions by over 35% from 1990 levels. And we've approved a 5-year climate action plan to get us to a 40% reduction by 2030 and ultimately to net zero. We've got over 230 LEED certified buildings, 53 solar and 3 wind power installations, and 23 campuses that use geothermal heat and cooling. And we want to do more, faster. We're looking to expand thermal energy networks at all of our campuses, which will not only reduce emissions, but we hope provide a template for cities and surrounding communities. SUNY researchers are working on so many of the new solutions to help us solve the climate crisis and create economic development opportunities here in New York. Next generation energy storage, advanced wind turbine design, durable materials for new modular nuclear reactors, low carbon construction materials, and more. And then, of course, to create the green energy workforce and economic opportunities for New Yorkers, we've worked with our state funding and thought partners to create academic programs, micro-credentials, and training institutes to meet the growing demands for power system engineers, heat pump, electric vehicles, solar power, wind power technicians, and sustainability and circular economy entrepreneurs. I'm particularly excited about Governor Hochul's SUNY Reconnect initiative, providing free community college for adults 25 to 55 in high demand workforce areas, including green jobs and renewable energy. So we're ready and eager to help advance the state energy plan and to help the state benefit from the clean energy economy. Again, I want to thank all of the staff and all the agencies around the table who worked on this report, including our Chief Sustainability Officer, Carter Strickland at SUNY. And I'm looking forward to the public comment and the discussions ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Chancellor. Do any other members have comments?
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Chair Harris. A couple of things I just want to very briefly state. One is the credibility of any plan is only as good as the analytics and the detailed the detailed study that goes behind it. And I would like to say, compliment not only the NYSERDA team, who I've worked more closely with, but really the cross-agency team that has done a lot of the work behind this. It really demonstrates a analytic, fact-based approach to a sensible outcome that helps us move in the direction of our climate goals, but do so thinking about the economic impacts, but also the reliability impacts of the electric system, which are so crucial to the success of all of this. So I do want to compliment the team that did that. It's really an impressive piece of work. Secondly is the comprehensive nature of the plan just demonstrates how challenging this effort is going to be. There's no one of these chapters that can successfully achieve their goals without the complementary success of some of the other sectors, because it's all really intertwined together. So from the standpoint of this being a really detailed, comprehensive plan, I think it achieves that. I think it addresses all the different components of it, and it just exemplifies how challenging this issue is. So from the standpoint of thinking about, you know, the success, the likelihood for success, and also what we attempted to do here and what has come out of it and what the team has produced, I think it achieves those objectives. So compliment you, Chair Harris, and the NYSERDA team and everybody that worked on it.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed to the vote, do the members of the board have any final comments on the plan that we are about to vote to issue? Hearing none. Next slide, please. I'll now request a motion and a second on Resolution 14 to approve the issuance of the draft state energy plan for public comment. May I have a motion? And a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Fantastic. The motion's carried and the draft state energy plan will be issued for public comment. Thank you all so much. Next slide, please. And next, NYSERDA, on behalf of the State Energy Planning Board, posted a pre-decisional draft of the plan on the State Energy Plan website earlier this week to comply with open meetings law. After today's meeting, the draft State Energy Plan approved by the board will be made available for public comment. The approved draft will be posted on the State Energy Plan website at the link posted on the slide. Included in this plan are several pieces to ensure the plan is as accessible as possible. We have prepared a summary for policymakers that provides an overview of the entire plan, several fact sheets, data annexes, and of course, the detailed technical chapters of the plan. The board will be accepting written comments on the plan until October 6th, 2025. Details on how to submit comments will also be available on the website. And finally, members of the public can also provide verbal comments. Beginning at the end of August, we will be taking the plan on a tour of sorts around the state to hear from New Yorkers. Next slide, please. On this slide, you will see the full list of public hearing dates and locations. We will host 2 virtual hearings and 7 in-person hearings across the state in August and September. Once confirmed, we will make available detailed venue information posted on the website and notify those locations prominently. We do hope to hear from as many New Yorkers as possible through this effort and very much look forward to that engagement as each of the members have discussed. Next slide, please. I will now ask if the members have any other business to bring before the board. Hearing none, I will move to our final slide. I do want to thank all board members and their delegates for coming to this energy planning meeting and for your participation today. And to round this out, I really would like to give my personal thanks to the staff of all the agencies that have contributed to the significance of this work product. And I take note that our energy plan is a deeply collaborative effort and done in service of all in this state. And for the members of the public who observe this meeting here in Albany and via the webcast, thank you for your continued interest in the state energy plan. And I will note on behalf of the board that we do look forward to our engagement during the hearing and comment period that will ensue. So please do visit the website to sign up for ongoing email updates. And this meeting of the State Energy Planning Board is hereby adjourned. Thank you all.